Hello, hello. I've never been so excited and so nervous all at the same time. Not even on my wedding day, I don't think. So, as many of you actually know now, because there has been some sneak peeks over the last couple of days, I have my first collection out with Creative Expressions, and it is a very surreal experience. Seeing these, it's just so surreal. I don't think I've ever been through anything quite like this before. It's been a really, really long journey. Creative Expressions contacted me in February and said, would I be interested in creating some stamps? And we were actually in the middle of creating the Foxy Rag to come out in March. So I asked if we could leave it for a bit. They came back to me mid-March. And by the end of April, I'd done my designs. So it's been a really long time coming, and it's been really, really hard not to say anything. But because it didn't quite feel real, it was easy not to say anything. It's very odd. Anyway, the collection that I have created includes an A6 background stamp, which you can see here. We've done film slides, which I love, especially these tiny little ones. I've used these so much. I love them. Had to do labels, didn't I? And the fill-in labels I thought were kind of perfect for the whole entomology and bug themed, because it had to be my first set, didn't it? Bugs. This was obviously inspired by my entomology passports, so you can absolutely make your own passports using the stamps. They can be used for lots of other things as well. And then the entomology papers, which I am so happy with. They just look amazing. So I'm not going to open these packagings because I have already started using some. And as you can imagine, my stamps, I've actually had them quite a while. So I've been using them a lot. And I've had to be really, really careful what I've shown in videos, because I have been very tempted to use them and I've had to kind of leave them aside. But I'm going to show you my stamps. But these are what mine now look like. They are used and I love them, and I hope you will too. So we're going to get on with making some things. So I'll show you the paper pad during the video. So I got these amazing colour cloud blending inks from Creative Expressions. They are a brand new product to me. I'd never used them before, and I could probably do with a little bit more practice. But I wanted to create a background for my project to use later on. These are really smooth to use. They go on really well. I was actually using quite a textured paper. I do want to try out on different papers, but I just needed to create this background. And you will see me use this later. So I just blended all of the different colours that I had. I thought they would all work fairly well together. As I was drying, you could see any streaks were kind of disappearing, and then I decided I would add some water. And I was really happy with how this background turned out for later use. So I'm just going to do a quick flip through of the 12 different designs in the paper pad. There are 4 of each paper in the pack. They are 150 GSM. It's lovely kind of matte finish on the papers. So this is the other side of the papers, and it's the other 6 designs. These can be used for covers, for collaging, for card fronts. There are a lot of uses for these, and there's lots of elements that could be cut out. So it's an 8 by 8 inch paper pad. So I'm just going to go through the paper pad and pull out 2 or 3 pages that I might want to use. during my project, and you can see they have a little border at the top which does need to be cut off. It's great though, because when you tear it out of the pad, if you get a little bit of glue tear, it doesn't actually affect the design. So I've chosen my papers, and I'm just going to cut that little strip off at the top, and you can see there is a little bit of damage to that strip, so it is a really good thing to have on the top of the paper pads. So I decide on which paper I'm going to start with for my project. So I've chosen this one with the two moths on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do is fold it in half. I want to keep the crease. That fold down. And then I'm going to make sure I don't cut the crease, and I'm cutting my tag to the edge of my trimmer, which is about 6.5 inches, and just cut that bottom bit off. I'm keeping all of my scraps. Now I'm going to make the width 3.25. I'm going to use my little card to make my tag top, and I'll make sure that I use the same one when I make my second tag later on. So we'll just flip that over and cut the other side. I want to create a torn pocket, so I'm just going to have a little look and decide, and I want to tear towards the inside, because then you get that white edge on the inside of the tag and you don't see that on your project. Keep my scrap, it's got a pretty flower on there. So that is my little tag with a pocket. So, of course, I've got to give that an ink, so I'm going to ink all the way around the tag, including the tear. And then we had a little bit of a footage mishap. So I've done some stamping using my stamping platform and the new stamps. I will be using them again later, but I just wanted to make a few little tags and elements that will be able to be tucked inside of my pockets. I've used old file folders in different shades to create these little tags, and I used an archival ink. So this is the little selection that I had made, and I'd also cut several of the little labels that I'd stamped. And again, you can see I've just used old file folder to give it that kind of vintage feel. When I use them, I will of course ink round the edges, and some of them I will stamp onto because that's how they've been designed. So I'd created a second tag the same way I created the first one, but on this one I wanted to use the piece I'd torn off on the back of the tag. So I'm just going to have a little play with some of those labels now, auditioning some styles, looking at layout to decorate both of these tags. I decided to do a little bit of stamping on the tags, so I used a red ink for this one. On the entomology identification tag. So again, I'm using red ink for the number, and then I switch out to green, but I use the little class tag so I know exactly what I need to stamp. And this is a winged insect, it's a bee, so I'm going to follow the subclass for that particular insect. And you can see the stamps will actually fit on there really nicely. They fit perfectly. Probably could have moved my stamps up slightly, but I do absolutely love the way they turn out. All of the stamps with my brush and ink just to give them a little bit more of a grungy look, darken them up a little bit, and then I'm going to glue them all into place, deciding on my final layout. So where I'd slightly smudged my sample stamp, I'm just going to glue this particular little label over the top of just the start of that S to just cover my mistake a little bit. And then I'm going to take the Insecta Study tag or label, stamp, whatever you want to call it, and I'm just going to glue that slightly behind to give that a bit more of a layered look. And you can see I've used 3 different colour file folders to put these together, just to give it a little bit of contrast and a bit more interest. Once my little cluster was kind of finished, I just added a little staple, one more little piece of interest in there before I glued that down onto my tag. Because I glue the whole tag, and of course once I've stuck that down, I had quite a bit of glue that I needed to remove, so I just rubbed that with my finger. It did remove fairly easily. Once I have finished with that cluster, I just move on to the label cluster for the other tag. Again, just moving them around, seeing what works. There's so many options. I'm just going to work out what I like and then glue those into place. Once I was happy with everything, I just lined up my little tag pocket and just glued that into place, and then I will glue the other tag flap down because I am going to do some sewing on my tags. I decide the pocket on the other side of the tag also needed a little label, so I just added one to the bottom there. So I got myself a nice cup of tea to carry on with this. I decided I would have a go at making a hinge using 2 safety pins. I have inked these safety pins, and I'm just going to put them in between. I cut myself 4 small little pieces of linen fabric. I don't want them to be too big because I don't want them to cover up too much of my tag and the beautiful papers. So I just make the edges a little bit rough, slide that on to my safety pin. I do actually decide this probably isn't the best way to do this. So I actually flip my tag over and glue the fabric to the tag first. I'm just smudging that glue in so it doesn't come through the fabric too much. Then I will turn the tag back over. It's upside down now because I've just filled in that little bit of glue. And then I'm going to add my safety pin. So I slide the safety pin on and then glue the other side of the tag to close that tab shut. I hope that makes sense. And then I slide on the other safety pin and do the same on that side. Just poke that through, a little bit fiddly. But it did actually work much better gluing the tag rather than trying to glue the fabric. Once they were glued into place on the right hand tag, I then threaded the fabric through for the left hand tag, and then I glue that into place. It actually works really well as a hinge. The only thing I did do is I made one of them slightly tighter than I should have done, which didn't give it quite as much room to move. However, you can kind of have the tags layered, so you've got a little bit sticking out. I love the look at it from the inside. So that's the tag laid flat. Now you can see you've got that little kind of overhang on the right hand side, or you can have the pins showing. I used a little bit of the scrap fabric and a tiny piece of scrap lace I had as a tab. Now, as I'm working along, you can probably tell that what was going to be the front of my tag didn't actually end up that way. I actually like the fact that you could use either way as a front. So I just glue that little tab into place before I do some sewing around my tag. Take it off to the sewing machine and do a straight stitch all the way around both tags. I'm really happy with it. I really like the way it looks, even before it's got anything inside it. So I take the little tag I've made with the orders and class and just ink that up and pop that into the first pocket, which will be actually the front. This little stamp I've left a little bit of an edge on this so I can turn it into a tag. So again, I'm going to use my little card to cut my smallest tag top, which I do both sides. Flip that over so it's the same. So once I get myself sorted out and I can actually use my tools, I put a little hole in the top of that tag and grabbed some wax linen thread. I used this because it's the only ivory that I could find. I would have liked to have used a little bit of a looser thread for this. Once I'd put the hole in, I just grab some of the stamps and put a little stamp on the top of that tag just to give it a little bit more interest. Now, in hindsight, I should have put it at the bottom of the tag so it would show once I put it in my pocket, but I didn't. So I'm just going to put that thread through. Once I'd managed to do that, just cut the top a little bit and popped it into my tag. And like I said, if I'd have stamped the other side, you might have been able to see a little bit of that, especially when I move it a little bit higher up that pocket in a little while. One of the reasons I wanted to use the safety pins as a hinge is because I thought it would be a great opportunity to actually use it to hold a little dangle charm. So I grab a little bee, it's a tiny little bee charm, and my jump ring. Just move those open by twisting it backwards, add my little charm, and then I tuck that straight on to the little kind of loop at the bottom of that safety pin. And as you can see, I think it looks great. I think it's a fabulous idea. I hope you like it. Make another little tag using one of the stamps. I'd left a little gap at the top so I had enough room for a hole, and just going to put some thread through there and pop that into the pocket. So another one of the stamps, I'd left a little bit of an edge around it so I could turn that into a tag shape. And because it's that kind of green, I've got a little butterfly stamp here that I found from my stash, and I'm just going to glue that onto the tag. Once the stamp was in place, I just decorated that a little bit more using another stamp, just with red ink. I didn't add a topper to this tag, but I've just popped it into another pocket. Now, this idea came from Susie at Shabby Soul. I'd seen her do this quite a long time ago, and I actually purchased some pegs and never did anything with them. So I'm just taking one of these little pegs and using my brush and ink just to ink that up very slightly. And because so many of the stamps in this set are quite small, this is the perfect kind of substrate to use these stamps on. So I take the little insecta stamp. I'm a little bit concerned about how it's going to work because it's quite porous, that peg. But I use, sorry about the light glare, use the little stamp, and I think it's so cute. I had stamped the film slide onto some transparency. I did have to use my magnets and a little bit of tape when I was doing this in my platform. And I've picked a die. It's a specimen slide die. I just wanted to use a little piece of that background just to cover up that file folder that I'd used. So I'm just going to glue this down onto that backing so you can't see the text. So what I decide to do is before I glue that shut is just to make sure I get my slide in the right place. So I hold it into place, glue the bottom so it's going to be just in view when you put that through the slide. Glue the bottom and a little bit of glue along the top if I can get my glue out. Biggest problem a crafter has, isn't it? Your glue doesn't work. And then you can see that can slide through that specimen slide. Now, I could have stamped on here, which I wish I had done now, but I didn't at the time. I do, however, go ahead and decorate that specimen slide a little bit, adding some stamping and also adding a little ball chain with a charm. So I'm really happy with that, and I do come back to this in a little while. So using the paper pad and stamps, this is what I created. I'm really happy with how it turned out, but I do want to decorate this further. So I actually have a coordinating traveller's notebook digital kit. Which works well with the paper pad and the stamps. And some of these elements in the digital I actually designed to work with the stamps. So as I was creating the elements, I had the stamps in mind. So there's lots of space suitable for stamping. I'm just going to grab, first of all, 3 of the tags. I have backed those with that backing Cosmic Shimmer, which I was really happy with. It makes a change from just using tea stained paper. I'm just going to ink these tags. These are part of the ephemera that comes in the digital, and I'm just going to add those into the tag I made. So there's also some labels. I'm going to just cut them out and add them to my little tags. So as usual, I managed to get glue all over my little label. So I'm just going to remove that before I add these to my tag. So this bumblebee is perfect for that front pocket. And as you can see, the little wing hangs out there. And with those stamp tags, it works really nicely. I'm going to add the dragonfly to this particular page because it's a winged insect. So I'm going to add that to this particular pocket. And then finally, I want to add the ant so you can see it through the top of that slide as it sits in the pocket. I know it's not practical and things will be removed, but I'm just going to grab a tiny little paper clip here and just pin that to the top of my tag. It will overhang the edge, but I kind of like that layered look anyway. And you can see that little ant perfectly through that slide. I loved how that worked out. So that's how it looks on the inside and the outside. Just going to close that shut with my little close peg or close pin, whatever you call it where you are. So that's finished and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I do decide that I'm going to make a few more little tags using the digital and the stamps because they are designed to work together. So this particular one, I've done another little transparency stamp and that would fit perfectly over there. Just auditioning a couple, see how they look. I decided that I liked this one. It fits perfectly on that little grey background area there, which is another little tag. And I'm going to stamp a little word so it will appear underneath. So I'm just going to remove that, use a little stamp. I'm going to go for red ink. Just going to make sure I get that lined up nicely. Add some ink to my stamp and stamp. Again, I've used winged insect and I'm just going to add another little stamp. So I switched to black ink for this stamp. I'm just going to double check I get that the right way up because it does need to be the right way. So I'm just going to add the ink. Add the stamp, and that just gives that a little bit more interest underneath that transparency label. So that looks pretty cool. I'm quite happy with that. So I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine and add a little stitch, and that turned out really nicely. So what I want to do is just give this a little bit of stability. So I glue it onto a piece of the spare file folder and cut that out. So after giving that a little trim, the final thing I need to do is just give that a little ink all the way around the edge. And I'm just really pleased with how this particular one turned out. I will do some more stitching around these right at the very end. But for now, I just wanted the stitching hidden for that little flap there. So now I'm just going to do another couple of the backgrounds. So things that are plain, I'll pick a few out that are suitable for stamping, get that into my stamping platform, and I'm going for the bug. I'm going to add a little bit of text. So now I'm going to grab my background stamp, and I don't want to use this as a whole because there's some really interesting patterns on here and textures. So I'm just going to ink up a small amount of the stamp and just dab that around. I really like the grid on this particular stamp, so I do use that in a few places. Once I've done that, of course, I decide I need a little bit of text. So I'm just going to use a red ink for this to pull out some of the colours in that background. and stamp the word holotype, and I'm also going to add another stamp in that top left hand corner, again using red ink and overlaying those stamps. Again, I'm really happy with how that one turned out, and it will look amazing once I've got a little bit of sewing around the edge of that too. So on this particular square, I stamped a bee. I was going to add another stamp, but I decided to add a little fussy cut flower, which I have used a little bit of glaze on. So I'm just going to add that last stamp, and then I'm going to glue the flower into place, and you can see how that turned out. And finally, I'm stamping this butterfly in blue onto this one. I'm going to add the word butterfly as well. And I'm finally going to add one last stamp. So I'm just going to stamp the number in black on this one. And we now have 3 little squares, little butterfly, and the little bee. You can see the little glossy accent on that. And that's the larger one. So before I started to film, I did make a little notepad. I hope to make another one and film it. I used the paper pad and some scrap book cover that I had. All of the papers in here are pretty much scrap or from old diaries. And these little squares would look really cool to decorate this little notepad, but so would the stamps. If you've got a little notepad, going through and using themed set of stamps works really well. And you could use a little paper clip or you could glue them in. So I really like that idea. I found it really hard to kind of stop, and I was just having a look at a couple more of the larger ones and just decided that I could add a little label to that one and maybe another little fussy cut flower. So I have just done a little bit of sewing around these final pieces. So I'll just show you what I did. I did actually put that one together. I thought that looked quite cute. I've backed them also. So there's that one, this one that I absolutely love, and this one. And then of course the final tag. So I think the addition of the little bee looks great. The little pieces, the stamps, the stamp pieces in the pocket, the little tag. Love the little peg. And then we've got the little stamp pieces in here. And of course that little slide with the little ant at the back there, the little charm. And then that's the back. I love the hinge. I think I'll do more of those. That looks really cool. And yeah, that's it. So I hope you like it. The stamps and the paper pad will be in my shop for UK, and they are also, I will actually add the link to Creative Expressions as well, so you can purchase from Creative Expressions. Thank you so much. I will see you all really soon. Bye.